Having issues getting your Crossfire transmitter to talk to your Crossfire receiver after firmware update? Then this video is for you. I'm going to show you how to bring them back together. Stay tuned. The Crossfire system has been very reliable for me. I've had no issues whatsoever until I went to upgrade the firmware on my transmitter. So once I upgraded the firmware on my transmitter, the quadcopter would not bind with this transmitter. No matter what I did, no matter what buttons I pushed, it just simply would not talk to the transmitter. Now, let me show you what I did to get these to communicate with each other once again. Okay, we're going to go ahead and plug in the module into the computer with a micro USB. We're going to go ahead and open up the TBS Agent X app here. And for those of you who do not know, the TBS Agent X no longer supports 32-bit version of Windows. You have to be running a 64-bit version of Windows. Now you see we have a little green icon right here, meaning that our micro TX is connected to the PC. Now, the correct way to update the firmware is you want to update the firmware on your receiver first, then update your micro transmitter. So once you're connected to the TBS Agent X, you have the quadcopter powered on and bound to the TX. You can go over here to the Nano RX and manage and go in here and change the firmware. Update the firmware on the receiver first, then go back and upgrade the transmitter to the same version of firmware. That way, the transmitter and the receiver are both on the same version of firmware. Best way to do this. You have to do it while the transmitter is plugged into the computer through the TBS Agent X app, and that's how you're able to upgrade the firmware on your receiver and on your TX. But if you accidentally upgrade your micro transmitter and don't do the receiver, then you may run into the problem that I did. So if you go in here to manage, go to firmware, you see right now I am on the version 2.93. You see where it says current. Let's go ahead and go to the newest version right here and click update. See, it's 100% completed. Now if I go back here to the firmware, you'll see now that my micro TX is now on the newest version, which is 3.23. I went ahead and put my module back in my radio and powered it up. Let's go ahead and plug in the quadcopter. You see we have a red light on the receiver and we have a yellow light on the transmitter. Now let's go ahead and go into binding here. So we're going to hit the menu button, hold, page over. We're going to go down to Crossfire. We're going to go to Crossfire Lua, execute, micro TX. Now watch what happens when I go into bind. See that? It's not communicating with the receiver. And I can even push on here, get it to go into binding. It is not going into binding mode. You see it said update receiver really quick and then it went away. But it will not let me talk to the receiver. See that? So, now you can see the red light is flashing on the receiver. Now, TBS says on the website, in order to get the receiver to go into binding mode, you're just supposed to be able to push this button once on the bind button. I pushed it once, but nothing changed. Let's go ahead and unplug. So at this point, I knew that they weren't going to communicate with one another, so I decided I was going to go back to the firmware version I originally had. So I went back into the TBS Agent X app, and I went back to my firmware, which was a 2.93. I downgraded back down to the old firmware that I had before. And you see that we're right back down to the 2.93 firmware. So I'm going to go ahead and turn on my transmitter.
Hi Eric, welcome back.
Now we're going to go ahead and plug in the quadcopter. Now at this point I've got the original firmware on the Micro TX and the same firmware on the receiver. See, I have a solid green light on the receiver. Now, it would not bind to the radio at this point. So, TBS says on the website that when you power it on and the receiver has a green light, you can push the bind button one time and the green light should start flashing slowly, indicating the receiver is in binding mode. However, as you can see, it did not work. So, there's a workaround for this. If you have run into this problem and your Crossfire Nano receiver will not go into binding mode by pushing the button one time, this is what you need to do. Hold down on the bind button while you plug in power. You should get a fast blinking green LED light. Now release the bind button. You should still have a fast blinking green light. Now press and hold the bind button again for 10 seconds. Once you see the LED slowly start to blink green, now you are now in binding mode. Go ahead and turn on your transmitter and it should bind to your receiver right away. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. And put it down in the comments any questions you have about the Crossfire system, and hopefully I'll be able to help you get these two talking once again so that you can have a good, reliable, trustworthy setup here. Now that I've got my Crossfire bound back with my quadcopter, I couldn't be happier. I'm so glad that I'm able to fly again and these two are talking to each other. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Till next time, E-Drone, out.